Hi, I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer.
I'm Kathryn Rubino. I'm a senior editor at Above the Law and one of the Thinking Like a Lawyer hosts.
Hey, my name is Chris. I've been writing and speaking with Above the Law for 3 years now.
We are celebrating our 400th episode. In honor of that achievement, not to pat myself on the back and call it a grand achievement, but I mean, let's be honest. We're going to chat a little bit about some of the exciting moments over the course of that whole run, and I hope you enjoy this and are still with us in another 400.
I still wish that I was there for when Aslaw was monikered. It's so good. Antonin Scalia School of Law. And this mine's like, wait, ass? Like, cause it's so good. It's so good. And, another one. I wish I was there when Hogan Levels got abbreviated as HOLOV. It brings me joy. And knowing that it's to the firm's or the school's chagrin in the case of Aslaw makes it that much sweeter.
I think I'm going to have to go with a kind of laugh/cry kind of a moment, and that is the 91-year-old law school graduate who took out somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 in student loans, and at this point, or at least as of 2 years ago, owed $350,000. It's, I think, very relatable.
I think of the first episode that I didn't appear on. I was on every episode that we ever aired for quite some time, and then the first episode where I didn't appear, that interview became the most expletive-filled, foul-mouthed, raunchy episode of all time. I leave folks alone for 5 minutes, and this is what happens.
If I could make any lawyer or politician come to the podcast to talk to them, it would be Cory Booker, and I'd ask him why he made up T-Bone. It was a ridiculous thing to make up, and I'm not sure what the legal ramifications of it are, but I need to know personally why would he invoke T-Bone during the run for office in Newark. It's neither here nor there, but if you're listening, Booker, this is your invitation.
I would love to ask a series of Trump's lawyers exactly how much money they were promised based on the invoices they sent and how much they actually ended up getting.
These are all stories that at least one of us has written about before, or one of our other colleagues or contributors. So there's things that have already been said about them. So what we try to do each week is to think sort of that next level, or things that are hard to communicate on paper, but maybe our tone can provide a little bit more of insight into it, or to try to figure out what the differences are, in my opinion, about a story versus Chris versus Joe, so we can really get some good back and forth banter going.
I don't know if it's something that the listeners might not realize, but I love the sound effects machine. It is mine. I wish I could find more opportunities to take advantage of it to the annoyance of everyone else on the show. You probably already realized that, but I try to downplay it on the show, but no, I really do love it.
The folks at Legal Talk Network clean us up, make us sound a lot clearer than we are while we're recording. Way more ums, more coughs, more getting up. So thanks to people that go behind the scenes and do the work to make sure that your listening experience is as smooth as possible.
Actually, that comes as a bit of a surprise. I've actually never known what the most downloaded episode was. That was one where I think even established lawyers had an interest in hearing more about it, and you definitely had folks who didn't have a legal background who wanted to hear how this was happening.
I think the reason that the Rittenhouse episodes resonated with so many people is because it felt like white folks' OJ trial. I remember when I heard the verdict, I was sitting in a bar and I looked up at the screen and the area went silent, and then they came back with a not guilty, and it was a moment where there was a weightiness to the room, like the air was thick. And then after the verdict was given, things resumed. The bartender continued moving, the patrons continued moving, but you looked around and you saw people just super glued on the screen, like if it was a Super Bowl game or something, and they were like quiet yays or but the lead up to that trial, it was so highly publicized and got at questions of race, agency, and politics in a way that wasn't the blatant content. Like I felt like it was a placeholder, like a master signifier for a lot of stuff that people were feeling and thinking about: protest, riots, self-defense in that moment.
I think when I recorded my first episode, I was a little nervous, heart racing, dry mouth, a whole full 9 yards. And now I guess I just do it every week now, but it feels very normal and like I'm just talking to my colleagues, because I am.
Early on, I just remember Ellie made a comment complaining about something that had happened to him and how against the law it was. And I immediately said, well, but that is the law. And quickly, he didn't know I had pointed this out. We had a funny moment early on, and I really think and that was within the first couple minutes of the show. And at that point, I think we were off to the races. We kind of knew our vibe, and I felt really good once we started going down that road.
When I recorded my first episode, I felt really nervous. I felt like Kathryn has been with Above the Law for like a decade. Joe's been with it for like a decade. And I was like unsure what I contributed to the conversation, if I was allowed or encouraged to contribute to the conversation, realizing over time that I was able to become more comfortable speaking and knowing that things that I'm saying will be heard by others.
The most challenging topic to cover, I think, is big law raises, because, when you're talking about traffic or what people have been reading a lot on our website, those are consistently some of our most engaging stories on the website, but there's not a lot to say about it.
I think the most challenging story that I've been discussing on the podcast has been the stuff following Pauline Newman's, which I think is an unconstitutional ousting from her position as a jurist. I think that the law's on her side, the facts are on her side, and it's one of the crappiest workplace disputes that I've been covering.
It's a recency bias, of course, because over 400 episodes, I can't remember what has happened all along, but I feel like Tom Goldstein's indictment, which has allegations of underground poker games and stuff like that, it is quite ridiculous. And I feel like that probably gets up there as the most ridiculous story. Now that I think about it, I can't remember if we covered. There was a past story years ago that was fairly ridiculous about a letter sent to a porn star's lawyer. And I think Ellie and I talked about it on the show when it happened. And the weird coincidence to that is that letter was written by Tom Goldstein.
I think the most ridiculous story I covered in this podcast was there was a time where a judge basically reprimanded an old guy for not cleaning his lawn properly. And I think that was one of the first judges behaving badly stories that I covered. Another thing would be, and this might be the most ridiculous story that we covered on the podcast. There was a judge, and she it looked like somebody trying to break into a car, and she was laughing, called him slurs, and then she blamed it on, I think, like her cough medicine. And then the company had to come out and be like, yeah, racism is not a side effect of our drug. I think that was the most ridiculous thing. I think it was Judge Odenat, if memory serves.
That is the series of Supreme Court ethics dilemmas, whether it be Samuel Alito or Clarence Thomas. It almost seems comical to me that these revelations about money that they've taken or titles that they've been bestowed, it just keeps on coming out. It's like a never-ending well of stories, and they just get more absurd every time we get more information.
One headline, don't know when it's going to happen. It is going to happen. Some major fundamental governmental thing is going to be ripped out from the root, and DEI is going to be blamed. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be the facilities that clean water get ripped up because of DEI, or if natural funding for like maintaining natural parks gets destroyed because of DEI, but that's going to happen at some point. I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop.
At the risk of being called a legal tech nerd, I would say that all of these copyright battles about generative AI are probably the stories that I'm most interested to see how they play out, because I think that's a technology that, while I'm not one of those people who believes it's magic beans, it's a significant technology. And if those cases turn out in a way that would limit people's freedom to develop and create that sort of AI, it could have significant impacts on the development of, the economy in general and the legal industry specifically.
I'm going to have to sort of go back to the Supreme Court on this one. I think there's going to just be more surprising decisions. I think we're going to be talking about the shadow docket. I think we're going to be talking about financial disclosures for the Supreme Court. And I don't know how bizarre they will get, but I am certain that whatever the reality is will outstrip my imagination.
Oof. Let's see. Clarence Thomas actually held accountable for something?
I think that in 400 more episodes, it's most likely that Joe will still be on the show. The OG thinking like a lawyer voice will continue to be there. And I sure hope it's not an AI version of his voice, because my guess is some of the pure sarcasm will be lost in translation.
I think that the question is too generous. I think that in about 2 weeks, our AI overlords will be taking over. So until then, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for commenting on what it's like to listen to us.
Obviously, we wouldn't be able to still be doing this after 400 episodes without all of you.
I hope you've enjoyed the last 400 episodes, and we look forward to bringing you at least 400 more.